June 18th, 1987. This journal was given to me by one of my friends a while ago, and I didn't get a chance to write in it until now. I'll try to make entries as often as I can. To begin, my name is Nikolai Smirnov. I am a sergeant in the Spetznaz, or Soviet Special Forces, though my specific unit is classified. If I were to write too much in this journal and it was discovered, I have no doubts that I would be severely punished. I can't say much of my previous missions because they're too classified, but our missions are mostly abroad in places like the Middle East and Central Europe. Currently, we are stationed in northern Ukraine, although that is likely going to change soon. As I sit on my cot writing this, the rest of the soldiers in our company are packing up and preparing deployment. Although the higher ranks have seemed quite agitated in the last few days, the rest of us are still in the dark as to where we're going. My friend Roman says he's heard that we're going to be briefed on the nature of our mission tomorrow. I'm going to have to stop here. Somebody is calling me. June 19th, 1987. Early this morning, we finally finished packing everything, and our convoy began traveling west. Towards the end of the day, we stopped and made camp for the night. We were told that our destination was only an hour away, and we would set out first thing in the morning. We were also told where we were going and why. Tomorrow, we will be in Pripyat, and then we will head on to our final destination, the ruin of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. They said that our mission is to recover important documents that, in the haste to evacuate, were left by scientists at the plant. Once it started to get dark, we set up our tents and started some campfires. The fact that we are going to Chernobyl certainly explains why we haven't stopped at any sort of town to rest instead of camping out in the wilderness. Anton was complaining as we set up our tents that it seems ridiculous that they needed this many men to retrieve classified information within our own borders. How important are these damn papers? I can't think of any that would be worth sending an entire company to retrieve, and special forces at that. This hadn't occurred to me, and now that I think about it, it does seem rather odd. It certainly doesn't seem like many men would be needed to come with so much equipment simply to retrieve some documents. Leonid, our squad leader, overheard Anton's complaining and replied, "Your job is to follow orders, not question them. Now get the rest of these tents set up." I guess even though it seems odd, Chernobyl itself certainly is odd. After the meltdown of the nuclear plant, the plant and an area of hundreds of miles was evacuated. Checkpoints were set up around the newly irradiated land to prevent anyone from going back in. Besides, in the Soviet Union, asking the wrong questions can get you in plenty of trouble. After the tents have been set up, the rest of my squad and I sat around the fire and talked for a while before turning in for the night. I suppose now is a good time to introduce the members of my squad. Leonid, a tall, imposing man with cunning to spare as our leader, and the lieutenant. There is also Roman, tall, lanky, and piercing green eyes. He's my closest friend out of the bunch. Then there's Yuri, who has fiery red hair that he covers up with a cap or helmet whenever he can. Terrible camouflage, he says. Anton, a short, shocky fellow who's often too outspoken for his own good. Mikhail, a quiet, soft-spoken rookie who is only recently assigned to our squad, and myself. I would talk about them more, but I think that's going to have to do it with tonight's entry. I'm getting tired, and almost everybody else is asleep.
June 20th, 1987. Early this morning, we packed up and set out for Pripyat, passing through several checkpoints along the way. As we made our way through the checkpoints, each one more heavily guarded than the last, I was surprised at the speed at which we were allowed to pass through them. Roman, Mikhail and I all expected that getting through the security forces around Chernobyl would take most of the morning, especially since we'd made the point of avoiding any people on the way here, and we hadn't even been told where we were going until we were almost there already. Clearly, there is something much more going on here than what we are being told. But we must act as if we don't know that, since the secret police are far deadlier than any dangers I have ever faced. When we got to the last checkpoint before we could continue into Pripyat, we were outfitted with heavy radiation protection suits, gas masks, and a bottle of anti-radiation pills each to keep ourselves safe from the radiation exposure. As we suited up, I overheard one of the guards who was bringing us the equipment complaining to his comrade, saying something about how at the rate we were coming, they would just run out of supplies for themselves. I waited for his friends to leave, and then I stopped him. When I explained how I overheard them talking and asked him what he meant, he jumped and turned to face me, eyeing me suspiciously. He looked awful. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he looked as if he hadn't slept in days. He turned to make sure that nobody else was listening and then pulled me out of earshot of anybody else. He said, "You are not the first group to come through here, you know. In fact, you're the fifth in the last 2 months. Yours is definitely the largest so far, though." Puzzled, I asked him, "Did any of them tell you why they came?" After all, they could have been research teams studying the effects of the radiation. After a disaster of this size, it would be important to know what the effects of radiation are on the surrounding wildlife and the people who are nearby. He sighed and then said, "Let me guess. You are here to get the data that the scientists left behind because of the evacuation. Important, classified, blah blah blah." "Then that's why they were here too?" I asked, surprised. He nodded grimly. "And let me tell you something else. Of all the 4 groups that came before you, none of them ever came back out." Before I could say anything else, he turned and headed back to the guardhouse. "Take care of yourself, comrade," he called over his shoulder. Suddenly, Roman walked up behind me. "Are you ready to go?" he asked. Yeah, I think so," I replied. "What were you talking to that guy about? You seem like you've seen a ghost," he said, frowning. I started, then noticed Leonid staring at me. I wasn't sure if he could hear us, but I decided that it wasn't worth the risk. "I'll tell you later," I said. "I think we're moving out anyway." Right on cue, the truck's engine started up again, and soldiers started climbing in the backs. Later that morning, we arrived at the outskirts of Pripyat and paused briefly before driving deeper into the abandoned city. The whole ride was absolutely surreal. As I sat in the back of one of the trucks looking out the back, I marveled at the way nature had already begun to reclaim the city. The utter silence, aside from the sound of the trucks making their way through the desolate streets, was unnerving. I looked back to the inside of the truck at my squad mates. Roman was asleep, as were Yuri and Anton. Mikhail was staring out at the skyline of Pripyat, fixated on the crumbling buildings surrounding us. Leonid just sat there with an expression of indifference. I wonder if he heard that guard at the checkpoint talking to me. I really hope he didn't. We'd both be in trouble. The guard for revealing sensitive information, and me for not reporting him. June 23rd, 1987. A lot has happened since my last entry. We've made it to the heart of Pripyat and set up a more permanent base camp, where we will stay until our mission is accomplished. The tents were set up in an intersection clear of abandoned cars. But our officers took up residence in some of the more intact buildings. Some of us were tasked with clearing out the buildings to make them more livable, myself included. It took a long time, and by the time we were finally done, the sun was already starting to set. Clearing out the buildings was the most depressing thing I have done in here yet. It was sad to think of all the people that were forced to leave with whatever they could carry, thinking they would be gone for a few days at most. Of course, that wasn't the case. I could go on and on about all the things we found. Photos of loved ones, children's toys, that sort of thing. But that wasn't the worst of it. I will not speak of what else we found there. Anyway, all of this got me thinking. The nuclear meltdown did this much damage. I can't imagine the destruction a nuclear war with the Americans could cause. I don't think I had ever really thought about that before. And, of course, there was something else. The further we have gotten into Chernobyl, the more uneasy I have felt. Not just because of the atmosphere of the place, but something else. I feel like we are being watched. Nothing bad has happened to us, of course, but something just feels off. I do know that there's almost certainly more to this mission than we're being told. What it is, I don't know. I hope it doesn't have anything to do with what that guard told me, and that he was just messing with me. I guess we'll have to see. Nothing much else has happened. Roman, Yuri, and myself played cards all afternoon, while Leonid was meeting with the other officers in the apartment complex they're using as the command center. I have not seen Mikhail all day though. When we woke up, his coat was empty and his boots and weapon were gone. I'm about to turn in for the night and he still hasn't come back. I think I'll ask Leonid about it in the morning. June 25th, 1987. It's been 2 days and we still haven't found Mikhail. When I told Leonid about it in the morning, he had us and another squad search the camp for him. There is no sign of him anywhere. Yesterday they started sending out patrols every hour, going further away from the camp in hopes of finding him. So far they have found nothing. I can't imagine why he would wander off or how he could have gotten lost. The commander says that he'll give it another day and then he's giving up. He says that we need those patrols out looking for a safe way through the pockets of high radiation surrounding the plant. That's what kept us from getting this mission done and getting out of here. Apparently, the higher-ups didn't think that the radiation around the plant would be in concentrated pockets around the plant. So much so that a couple meters could be the difference between an irradiated suit and dying 30 days later from radiation poisoning. This mission is going to take a lot longer than we thought. June 26th, 1987. Things around here have taken a turn for the worse. One of the patrols that was sent out vanished. When they didn't come back to base on time, another 5-man patrol was sent out to look for them. Of those 5 men that were sent out to look for them, only 2 came back. An hour after they left, they were spotted a block away running back towards the camp. Both were visibly shaken, and one of them was crying. When one of the officers asked them where the rest of their squad was, the man who was crying just sobbed even harder, and his friend just stood there with a horrified expression on his face, not saying a word. Neither of them would talk. This in itself was enough to put the whole camp on edge, and it only got worse when both of them committed suicide soon after. The crying man was the only one who ever spoke with anyone. And the only thing they were able to get out of him was that everyone else in his squad was dead. When they tried to get him to tell them how they had been killed, he fell silent, started to say something, then stood up, took his pistol, and walked out of the tent. They followed him out and found him sprawled on the ground with a bullet in the side of his head. I don't know what's going on, but what I do know is that there is something out there that horrified these men so much they took their own lives because of it. I can only hope that my squad and I will fare better. When Leonid's not around, Anton talks about deserting. I don't know what the hell's going on here, but I don't like it. I could take one of these trucks and get out of here while I still could, if it weren't for the security around this place. They'd never let any of us leave this place alive once they found out we ran off. Yuri nodded and said, "That's the problem, isn't it? We're stuck here until we finish the mission, or everything goes to hell. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure that there's a whole lot more to this than they're telling us." No one spoke for a while. Finally, Roman broke the silence. "Well, I am going to get some sleep. I have a feeling we're not going to get much rest for a while." Everyone mumbled in agreement and shuffled off to their cots. Roman's right. I think this is the last good night's sleep anyone is going to get here for a while. June 28th, 1987. This is going to be a long entry. My hands are still shaking as I write this. I think it's morning, but I can't know for sure. The floor we're in has its windows boarded up, and we already barricaded the doors. Everyone's nerves are shot, and our rations are probably going to run out soon. Let me start at the beginning. Everything went to hell sometime around noon of yesterday. That morning, we finally got underway and began the trip to the plant around 0600 hours, with about half of us staying at the camp. It was cloudy, with dark storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The rest of us got our gear together and climbed into the convoy of trucks and armored personnel carriers waiting for us outside of the camp. The first half of the ride was relatively uneventful. My squad rode in one of the APCs this time, one of the new models, a BTR-80. It was buttoned up, so we had no view of the outside world as the 8-wheeled behemoth rolled through the abandoned streets. There was plenty of chatter on the radio, mostly just idle talk between vehicles, but inside ours, apart from the driver talking into his headset, there was only an awkward silence. Later on it started to rain, and Leonid had Anton close the top hatch. We heard the tapping of raindrops on the roof of the BTR become louder as the rain got heavier. After about a half hour, at least I think it was a half hour, I shifted uncomfortably in my seat and turned to Roman in an attempt to break the silence. But before I could even open my mouth, Leonid suddenly tensed up. I thought he was going to say something, but when I looked at him, he was listening intently to his radio. It started out soft, and I tried to listen to whatever the person on the other end was saying. However, whatever they were saying, it was mostly lost in the shouts in the background. I wondered what the commotion was about, and was about to ask when the words on the other end were drowned out in a burst of gunfire. Everyone in the vehicle turned towards the radio. On the radio, the sound of gunfire was becoming more intense, and the voice yelled to someone in the background, "Get the officers inside and put snipers on the rooftops! They must not breach the perimeter!" We turned to each other, our eyes wide. My mind raced. Who was attacking the camp? My first thought was that it was NATO or the Americans, but that seemed unlikely. My next thought was that it might be feral wildlife, though it would have to be a fairly large group, perhaps a pack of feral dogs, to cause such a commotion. My thoughts were interrupted by the sudden, worried talk between the rest of my squad. "Quiet!" yelled Leonid. We turned to him in surprise. Leonid was by no means friendly, but he was usually unemotional and distant. Now he seemed worried and angry. I could hear it in his voice. Whatever was going on, it was serious. At some point during all of this, the BTR must have stopped. "What's the hold-up?" complained the driver, looking out at the vehicle stopped in front of us. "Might be a car blocking the road or something," offered Yuri distractedly. The driver frowned. "This way's supposed to be clear," he muttered, shaking his head. "I don't." Suddenly, we all heard a loud crack of thunder, followed by a long rumbling and vibrations we could feel through the floor of the BTR. This lasted maybe 5 seconds before it abruptly stopped, and we were left with nothing but the sound of the rain. The driver listened to his headset for a couple of minutes before turning to us. "A building up ahead got hit by lightning. Apparently it set off propane tanks inside and brought part of it down. It's blocking the road, so we're waiting until the storm lets up to clear the road." Anton groaned. "You mean we're stuck here?" The driver nodded. "This is the only way that's not full of radioactive hotspots that we could find. We're just going to have to wait it out." I turned to Leonid, expecting him to say something to Anton, but he was still listening to the radio. I'd almost forgotten about it, and now as I strained to hear what he was listening to, I could only hear static. I leaned closer just as the static cut out and the sounds of gunfire filled the vehicle again. Everyone in the squad turned back to Leonid. He was too focused on the radio to pay attention to us. And we all took a good look at him. He looked slightly pale. He was frowning and muttering to himself. I couldn't tell what he was saying though. Roman nudged me and jolted me out of my thoughts. "Did you hear that?" He half whispered to me, his eyes wide. I nodded uneasily. "I'm sure they're fine. The gunfire is much less intense now. Sounds like they're just cleaning house now." Roman shook his head. "Not that," he said. I listened closely, and then I realized that mixed in with the gunfire, that lessened with each passing minute, I could hear screaming. I can't write more now. I can hear something coming.